Okay, so hopefully, yeah, I know I'm alone. Me and Craig. Sorry, Craig. I'm not alone. With Craig here. Uh, the friendly meditation mind bot, Craig. And yeah, just getting ready to start here, and we'll see if anybody joins in the party. And I will admit here that I haven't pre-read, so this will be fun. If anybody joins me live, then there'll be lots of really long pauses as I struggle through the text. And hopefully you'll struggle through as well. Or if you're someone who's really knowledgeable about this text, oh gosh, you're always welcome. We'd love to have you. Yeah, definitely. So we left off Sutta 14, actually, on page 46, the top of 46. Venerable Sariputta, when asked of purity in terms of virtue, mind, you, the overcoming of perplexity, knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path, knowledge and vision of the way, knowledge and vision is total unbinding through lack of clinging, you say no, my friend. But when asked if total unbinding through lack of clinging is something apart from these dhammas, you say, no, my friend. Now, how, my friend, is the meaning of these statements to be understood? Venerable Punamantanaputta, if the Blessed One had described purity in terms of virtue as total unbinding through lack of clinging, my friend, then he would have defined something still accompanied by clinging as total unbinding through lack of clinging. I love this. And oh, it's just so great that we're reading this right now because I have been absolutely in this trap right here. In fact, today, this is just brilliant. Today, yesterday I had read this blog. It's really, really strong. I thought, it was a really, really great writer, but clickbait title, is Buddhism wrong? So of course, my clinging, right? My Shempa, whatever, my ego, just jumped right on that, right? Just pounced right on it, and it was such a thoughtful article. I really enjoyed reading it. There was something that the gentleman he had said something in the article that, speaking of Shempa, had really, really triggered me. And I won't go into it here. And again, right, it is not he who is triggering, it is I who am triggered. It really got me to do a lot of thinking. And it's kind of ironic that, anyway. Again, I have no idea if I'm getting this right. Okay, so full disclosure, I have no flipping idea if this is what's being said. I'm going with my intuition here, which is right, totally fabricated on a myriad things. I'm also turning on my fan because dying in here. Okay. What I think is being said is what this lovely gentleman whose blog I read earlier today, it was kind of the same lesson that I got from reading his response to my response to his blog. So he had compared Buddhism to Marxism, or at least I took what he wrote literally, not realizing that it was tongue-in-cheek. Because, that's easy to do, right? When you're in text, you can't, humans, 80% of our communication is nonverbal communication. So that tells you a lot about how much is lost, right? When we keep our camera off. Hear this. Anyway, so I wrote him, and, I was kind, but I was concise. In other words, I was clear. I didn't beat around the bush. And I just said, hey, great, I really enjoyed your blog, but I just want to distinguish, that there's some radical differences between Marxism and Buddhism. And I wasn't rude about it at all. I was just saying, hey, I just want to point out that, there's some substantial differences here. Just lest others not realize that. For those of you who are getting to know me, I'm very type A and very precise. Now we're getting to this. My need for precision, right? My need. It's in the word need, right? The need for control, the need, again, this just so savors of something that I wrote in earlier in the Discord server, that I've been kind of going through some emotional stuff, some reactions, some trolls, some shempa, some reactions, some patterned responses that have been flaring up, like arthritis in my body can flare up. It's the fire of the mind, the fire of the body. And he was very kind in his response, and he's like, oh yeah, actually this is what I meant. And then he went on to say basically what's being said here, and I really appreciated it. And it didn't feel like he was scolding me at all. That's not at all how I took what he wrote. And even if he was scolding me, I'm totally okay with it. And he was right. If I'm taking this passage to be what I think it means, which is that the path itself can become an act of clinging. And this is the huge one for me. I don't know if there's anybody else on this server that maybe it's not Buddhism for you, maybe it's Hinduism or Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism or Islam, whatever your religion is, or maybe it's not a religion, maybe it's some other identification, right? And that's really, I think, what's getting at here, right? Some other fabrication, some other identification, where sometimes I can catch myself clinging to it as if it was a lifesaver. As if it was a life jacket. And I don't know if that's what's meant here, but yeah, help. Hi, welcome, demo. I was also, yeah, just let me know if you want to jump in. Just starting was the pop of page 46.
So, my friend, I will give you an analogy. For there are cases where it's through analogies that observant people can understand the meaning of what is being said. Suppose that while King Pasenadi Kosala was staying at Savatthi, some urgent business were to arise at Saketa, and that between Savatthi and Saketa, 7 relay chariots were made ready for him. Coming out the door of the inner palace in Savatthi, he would get in the first relay chariot. By means of the first relay chariot would he reach the second relay chariot. Getting out of the first relay chariot would he get in the second relay chariot. By means of the second relay chariot, he would reach the third. By means of the third, he would reach the fourth. By means of the fourth, the fifth. By means of the fifth, the sixth. By means of the sixth, he would reach the seventh relay chariot. Getting out of the sixth relay chariot, he would get in the seventh relay chariot. I mean, oh my God, this is kind of hard to read.
Right?
Relay chariot. By means of the seventh relay chariot, he would finally arrive at the door of the inner palace at Saketa. As he arrived there, his friends and companions, relatives and kin would ask him, "Great king, did you come from Savatthi to the door of the inner palace in Saketa by means of this chariot?" Answering in what way, my friend, would King Pasendi Kosala answer them correctly? Venerated Sariputta said, "Answering in this way, my friend, he would answer them correctly. Just now, as I was saying in Savatthi, some urgent business arose at Saketa, and between Savatthi and Saketa, 7 relay chariots were made ready for me. Coming out the door of the inner palace in Savatthi, I got in the first relay chariot. By means of the first relay chariot, I reached the second relay chariot. Getting out of the first relay chariot, I got into the second relay chariot. By means of the second relay chariot, I reached the third. By means of the third, I reached the fourth. By means of the fourth, the fifth. By means of the fifth, the sixth. By means of the sixth, I reached the 7th relay chariot. Getting out of the 6th relay chariot, I got in the 7th relay chariot. By means of the 7 relay chariot, I finally arrived at the door of the inner palace at Saketa. Answering in this way, he would answer them correctly. Venerated Puna Mantaniputa said, in the same way, my friend, purity in terms of virtue is simply for the sake of purity in terms of mind. Purity in terms of mind is simply for the sake of purity in terms of view. Purity in terms of view is simply for the sake of purity in terms of the overcoming of perplexity. Purity in the terms of overcoming of perplexity is simply for the sake of purity in terms of knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path. Purity in terms of knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path is simply for the sake of purity in terms of knowledge and the vision of the way. Purity in terms of knowledge and the vision of the way is simply for the sake of purity in terms of knowledge and vision. Purity in terms of knowledge and vision is simply for the sake of total unbinding through lack of clinging. And it's for the sake of total unbinding through lack of clinging that the holy life is saved under the Blessed One.
Wow, thank you.
That was a mouthful, damn. That was not easy
Wow, well
reading.
done. Well done.
It's
Wow.
challenging.
Yeah, do you want to comment, or do you want me to comment first? Do you want a break? What I know I have some
I
things to
would
say, but
I
do you
would
want to go first?
love
Go
to
for it.
hear your thoughts because I'm not really into Buddhist scriptures, so this is
Okay.
all new to me.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. And thank you for the read, cuz yeah, this is so dense. I was laughing with you as you're
Great.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you
Um
for opening this new world for me. This is all new
Oh my
stuff.
gosh. Well, my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. Okay. I was really enjoying listening, and I was really cognating. I was working hard there. So to my view, and I think I don't know how much of this you caught, but right before you came on, um, is it demo? Right before you came on, I
Yeah.
was talking about the reading great right before this, and kind of comparing it to something that had happened in my day. And I think that this is kind of getting at it. So the sutta before this, if I was understanding it correctly, was I was comparing it to, for me, actually, something that I really struggle with, which is that I can get really attached to the path itself. And I find that when I'm fearful, like if I'm feeling really like I'm in a situation where I don't think I have a lot of control, um, I cling. And I'm laughing because it's a paradox. It's like it's the opposite of what we're trying to do. So this for me is, if I'm understanding it the way it was intended, then it's a good message that I needed to hear today, because I think it's getting at all of the, going back to the earlier readings, that all of these are one of the things that I like about the Eightfold Path for myself, in terms of just like, hey, I'm going to make a decision to like follow it, like do the best that I can, I'm just going to like do my best to follow it, is that they all work together. And I think this is saying, hey, all of those chariots are getting us to this venerable place. We're all arriving here. And whether it left from chariot 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 is irrelevant. Now, I don't really know if I'm quite getting at that. I'm correctly. This is where I really, if you've listened to past episodes, I talk about how I'm not an academic. I'm very much a lay Buddhist that lives in the West. And so I have zippo, experience with the language. Yeah, so full
Right.
disclosure.
Right. Well, you probably know a lot more about it than I do. Uh, I mean, I have been at some Buddhist meditations, and I've been to a Buddhist monastery, but I've never really dove into like the teachings much, and
Yeah.
the actual, how do you say, um, like the actual content
Yeah.
of the Buddhist religion, I suppose. So
Yeah.
this is quite interesting. I know
Yeah.
that it's all about enlightenment and attaining nirvana, and trying to leave the path of the cycle of reincarnation. And I know that there's the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Way. So
Yeah.
I kind of know
Yeah.
like the core concepts, but I don't really, never really got into the depths of it all.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
so so my friend, let me make sure. Wait, am I doing what you just did? Wait a minute now. We had all the chariots.
Yeah, so I read up
We did all the
until
chariots.
I don't know what the symbol is, but 16
Okay, great.
Magandia.
Okay. Wow, we might actually make it through the chapter. That's amazing. Okay, here
Mhm.
we go. So yeah, Agandia, and I think you're saying it better than I am. This inner peace, what does it mean? How is it by the enlightened proclaimed? The Buddha. He doesn't speak of purity in connection with view, learning, knowledge, habit, or practice, nor is it found by a person through lack of view, of learning, of knowledge, of habit, or practice. Letting these go without grasping, at peace, independent, one wouldn't long for becoming. I really love this because this is previous episodes I talk about this a lot. This is how I know that I'm still in the karmic wheel. I get frustrated. I just wrote a
Mhm.
blog post about this today, that I get frustrated when people are coming to the palace from chariots 1 and 2, and I know that's not
Mm,
that's not
interesting.
that's not open-hearted. And I think that it comes from where I live in the last few years and how divisive people have become, and it's been hard to keep my heart open. And I think that that's why one of the reasons why I love this Discord server so much is that, like for instance, I just started a new event. Would I have committed to this event if you guys hadn't have been here? Probably not. No, it's like this passage is getting at what I've been grappling with, and Buddha's reminding me, stop. The path itself is clinging. Stop clinging. And I can sometimes, when I'm feeling threatened, I can use the Eightfold Path as a shield, as a protective mechanism to keep myself separate from others. And I really have to watch myself, and this is really reminding me it's not about any of that. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's like full of paradox. Buddhism is. But this to me is a reminder. So yeah, I don't know. You have any thoughts on this? Sutta 16.
Let's see. Uh, this inner peace, what does it mean? How is it by the enlightened proclaimed? So this is a character, Magandia, asking this question to Buddha, if I
Oh,
remember.
I'm sorry. You asking me?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes. And then the Buddha's responding. So it's almost like a Socrates. Is that right? Was it Socrates or Plato who did that? Where it was like a question answer. Yeah. So he's
Oh,
asking the
you,
question,
yeah.
and then the teacher is answering. Yeah. So that you got it.
Mhm. He doesn't speak of purity in connection with view, learning, knowledge, habit, or practice, nor is it found by a person through lack of view, of learning, of knowledge, of habit, or practice. Letting these go without grasping it at, at peace, independent, one wouldn't long for becoming. Hmm. Well, this is just the core practice of Buddhism, I suppose. It's just pretty straightforward, right? This is what Buddhism is, letting go of all these things, and without grasping, don't
Yeah.
long for becoming. This is just seems like very core Buddhist, so to speak. I mean, I don't know much. I haven't really read much of this
Yeah. The
stuff,
whole
but
book would be core Buddhist. Absolutely. Yeah. Right from the Pāli Canon, hot off the. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So Magandia is like, what? How do I get this inner peace? Like, what do I do? And then Buddha's like, yo, just let go. Just-
Yeah. And it's a paradox. If you go back and you read earlier section of the book, Buddhist talks about how absolutely earnest the Eightfold Path actually is. So it's a paradox to what's being said here. So it's interesting, right? He's saying two things. He's saying let go, but he's also saying you will never have freedom if you don't follow this path. And he's really clear. Like, I don't know if you've read earlier in this book, like in the earlier suttas, but it's really interesting. You're trying to unpack, okay, so how can two things be true? And that's where I
but
get
they can
trapped,
be.
right?
Two things can be true. Yeah.
Can they?
And
Yeah, right, exactly. Can
yeah,
can you follow the Eightfold Path but also not follow the Eightfold Path? I mean, that's kind of what he's suggesting. Yeah.
exactly.
Oh my
Well, two
gosh.
things can be true. For example, it's true that our body and mind are separate, but it's
Yeah.
also true that they are one thing. So
Yeah.
there you go. Two things
Yeah.
can be true.
Two things can be true. Yeah.
And
Do,
it's also
do,
true that we are eternal, but it's also true that we have an end. So two things are true at the same time.
Okay, so now you believe we're eternal. Do you have a so you're not an atheist, it sounds like maybe you have a religious framework that you grew up
It's kind
with.
of, it's really hard to say.
Okay, it's really hard to say. Yeah,
Very,
I'm
very
doing research on that right now, actually,
right.
about groups like this, and what happens when you get people from all over the world, that some who are Buddhist, some maybe Christian, some who are atheists and don't believe that we're impermanent, that just believe when we're dead, we're dead. And what happens when you get them all in a community together? What happens?
You get a lot of arguing, I suppose.
But we don't, do we? That's my point. It's like that's what I love about this server, right? Like, I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist Buddhist, right? But nobody ever gives me grief for that here. It's a really cool feature of this server, is that people can have different views and different beliefs, and not need to fight for their being right. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty. It's good to have just freedom of expression and not some people just claiming that.
They're right.
I'm quite
They're right.
sick
They're
of
right
like.
because they think they're right.
Quite sick of like all these religious like fundamentalists claiming that only their whatever organization or set of legalistic practices is going to lead to, I don't know, whatever kind of
Yeah.
attainment that they want,
Yeah.
and just dismissing all the others as just like what, they're just all false. Like
Yeah.
they're either all true or they're all false. I kind
Yeah.
of, that's kind of my stance. Like you're either gonna be, completely rational, just like materialistic, or you're gonna
Yeah.
accept that spirituality doesn't just belong to like one person or one
Yeah.
thing. Well, I don't
Yeah.
know.
It sounds
So,
like you have a really open mind. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your open-mindedness. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, you know, um, religious or moral views kind of being foisted upon me, I think would be very hard for me personally, because I grew up in the United States, and I'm so conditioned to not having that foisted on me. That
mhm.
it's hard for me to imagine what it must be like to maybe live in a culture where you feel like you don't have any autonomy. Or maybe that's not even an issue for people. I don't know. It's that whole cultural differences thing that I think is so cool about what happens in spaces like this. Because I get to meet people from all over the world, so they have a totally different
Right.
perspective than mine, because they're a total different framework of how they grew up, and what was maybe there was a cultural religious norm for them that absolutely seeped into their. In Buddhism, it's called fabrication. If you go back and you look at the earlier parts of the chapter here, in Buddhism, the five aggregates are what form our fabrication. And if you look at what the five aggregates are, it's basically what people are talking about now when they talk about intersectionality. So when I get to meet people in the server who have different intersectional features than mine. That's awesome. I mean, it's still fabrication. It's still bullshit, just like mine's bullshit, but it's, as long as you know it's bullshit, you're okay. I think that's the important
Right.
difference in Buddhism,
I
is
love
that
that.
you recognize that it's not real, it's impermanent. It's just a story, it's not real, it's not real. And as soon as we start thinking it's real, then it becomes problematic, and that's how we have war, and that's how we find ourselves where we are today, so attached to our right view, what we perceive to be right. Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, I kind of share the opinion there.
Do you live in the US? Do you mind sharing, or
No,
you
no,
don't
I
have to
live
do that?
in, I live in, yeah, I live in southeastern Europe, so kind of like
Oh
a
wow. Okay.
former communist country where, um, well, since this is being recorded, I won't say exactly which one, but
Oh
um,
yeah. I can stop
I
recording. Just
it's
say the word.
it's a,
Okay.
it's a country where communism has been active for a very long time, and
Okay.
so religion was kind of seen as kind of like a not a good thing, like not
Okay.
something that you want to be doing. And then with the fall of communism, the religion has resurged, like resurfaced in a major way as a kind of national pride and a national sense of national identity with ties to the religion.
Oh,
So
interesting.
a lot of tribalism and a lot of
Oh,
kind of professing belief that you don't actually truly believe in, but you just kind of need to because you're a part of the culture. So kind of like a cultural religion. So it's kind of, a bit of a different background than most the most
wow.
I mean,
It's really
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Wow. And I hope I don't sound insensitive. I don't mean to, but it is. It's, to me, it's very interesting. It's very, it's very, very different from everything I've experienced.
Yeah. So
Wow.
you
Yeah.
have this kind of
Yeah.
older generation that's like you know, a lot of them are atheists because that was the norm. You were supposed
Right.
to be atheist in communist times, but a lot
Right.
of them were holding out during those times and were subscribing to the religion anyway because they were just, it was just in their tradition. And now with the fall of communism, it's still kind of like that, but there's a clear divide between people who, look down on religious people because of the communism and the people who found the tradition and stayed with it, or so yeah, I don't want to bore you too
Yeah.
much, but
Yeah,
it's
no, no,
definitely
that's so
different.
interesting. That's so interesting. Um and thank you. I appreciate your willingness to share that about yourself. Yeah, America is growing more. Well, it's really interesting. Like I didn't know this until I started reading, and I was surprised. I had assumed, I presumed that America was really, really super religious right now, but it's on the decline a lot in the United States, and the shift is primarily coming from Generation Z. You know the
Hmm.
generation, I think maybe right after yours, or maybe I'm not sure what, I can't remember what the years are, but I think it's really, really interesting, because I think maybe for the first time in American history, secularism is on the rise, and I'm really interested to see, how will that play itself out, in the United States over the next. I
Well, I
won't be
wouldn't
around to see
say
it,
it's
but
right. Well, I wouldn't say that it's like the first time that it's happening, because like you had all these like hippie movements and like rock and roll and stuff that completely secularized the culture. Like, I mean, pretty much.
well, I don't know. I would argue that the hippie movement kind
But
of
like just as
colonized
an
Buddhism a little
example.
bit. So I might disagree with you on
Yeah.
that front there. Yeah,
Well, go for like
they
church
definitely
stuff.
took lots of ideas from Buddhism and kind of reappropriated them to a certain degree. Certainly, the Beatles were well known for that, as were the beat writers like Jack Kerouac and William
Right.
Ginsberg and all those guys. But I totally hear where you're coming from. Yeah, that it was a more secular time in the United States for sure.
Yeah, so I get Gen Z, it's all these other people moving away from the church and from Protestantism, I
Yeah,
suppose. Traditional
yeah,
American
yeah,
kind of. The
yeah,
roots,
yeah. It's
the
cool.
Protestant.
Gonna be a cool study. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm looking forward to running the study and seeing what how it all plays out. Like we're looking at so I'm a psychologist, so we're looking at something called moral foundations theory, social
Mhm.
presence, and cognitive dissonance as it relates to religious or spiritual identification or none. So we're going to take all of those
Mm.
quantitative data points and pit them against each other, and then measure those against different demographic segments. To kind of see, like, yeah, what happens in global online communities when you put human psychology at play against these dynamics. Because like I'm particularly interested in moral foundations theory, which is relatively new, and I think is our I think Homo sapiens lack of understanding about what it is kind of also why we're here, at least in the U.S. in terms of the kind of polarization. So I'm hoping to see a lot more studies coming out that are actually looking at moral foundations theory, because I think it explains a lot about human psychology in the U.S. right now and why we're behaving so irrationally in a lot of ways. I
Right,
often
that's
wonder what you
very
guys
cool.
think of us. You guys in other parts of the world, you must think we're morons. I think we are.
Oh man, I don't know. A lot of people from my generation are like flocking to America for the work and travel programs and really finding themselves there. People who, you know,
Ah,
really appreciate what America has to offer for us because, we're
makes me
not
happy.
so great economically speaking. So therefore, anything
Yeah.
shiny and rich is going to be amazing for us. So America's
Oh,
pretty
sure.
cool
That makes
for us.
perfect sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Now I'm talking from my privileged state of living in the US, which I'm sure for a lot of people is a major a major dream. Yeah.
Well, I know several people. Like, for
Wow.
example, I know one person, my previous landlord. I came to live there, and I met her, and uh, as I kind of got to know her a little better, I found out that her husband is American, and I was so surprised. I was like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
you got an American husband?" Because you don't really meet an American just any day here where I live.
Okay.
And yeah, she met him on a work and travel program, and she
Hey,
just they fell in love, and then that's that. She loves
it's
America
lovely.
now, and
It's
so there you go.
I love that.
So
I
it's
love that.
not every. So a lot of people do appreciate you guys. So
Yay. Yeah. Um, I work in virtual reality. I can't wear it myself because it makes me ill, but I think it's really cool technology. And there's a couple people that I just read about who met in virtual reality. And they just got married in virtual reality. It's just so romantic. It's like I think one person's from Ireland and the other person is, oh gosh, I want to say like Croatian, maybe. Yeah. Anyway,
all right, yeah, that
cool.
was
Very.
a former communist country.
Yeah. Love is good. Well, do you? I
Yeah, sure.
normally I would kind of start to wrap it up, but yeah. Do you? How's things going? I mean, we could do another section, or
Yeah, sorry if I like derailed your
not at all.
recording session. I just kind of
Not at all.
spontaneously
I
came in
enjoyed
here.
the conversation. I enjoyed the conversation. I will ask you this though, and this is very important to me because I do record these. Would you prefer that I just cut all of this out and not drop it into my episode? Because I edit all of these. I
You
don't just like drop the recordings as is. I edit everything.
you can keep me in. I mean, I
Okay.
will be happy to. I've always wanted to be kind of a YouTuber, so
Okay, you're officially. I don't know. I don't even know if anybody listens to the. But
you
right on.
guys
I've
will-
enjoyed talking to
yeah.
you. Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
nice
I
to
mean,
have
this
some
is
company.
really interesting.
Yeah, cool.
We could go a little bit longer if, I mean,
Yeah, right on. Okay,
how
so I
about
think I
a
ran less. Do you want
couple
to do
more
this next
sections?
section? Okay, so I think it's Sutta 17 we're on, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I'll just try it. Um, so, on the word noble. So, what's the symbol? Like this symbol and then 17? I don't know. It's kind of
Oh,
like.
that's sutta. Sutta and the Pāli. These are called
Ah,
suttas. They're like passages. You got it.
okay, sutta. All right. Sutta 17. Monks. There are these two searches, ignoble search and noble search. And which is the ignoble search? There is the case where a person, being subject himself to birth, seeks happiness in what is likewise subject to birth. Being subject himself to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, he seeks happiness in what is likewise subject to illness, death, sorrow, and defilement. And what may be said to be subject to birth? Spouses and children are subject to birth, men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephant, cattle, horses, and mares. Gold and silver are subject to birth. Subject to birth are these acquisitions, and one who is tied to them, infatuated with them, who has totally fallen for them, being subject to birth, seeks what is likewise subject to birth. And what may be said to be subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow and defilement? Spouses and children, men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares. Gold and silver are subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow and defilement. Subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement are these acquisitions, and one who is tied to them, infatuated with them, who has totally fallen for them, being subject to birth, seeks what is likewise subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement. This is ignoble search. And what is the noble search? There is the case where a person, himself being subject to birth, seeing the drawbacks of birth, seeks the unborn, unexcelled security from the yoke, unbinding, himself being subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement, seeing the drawbacks of aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement, seeks the aging less, illness less, death less, sorrow less, undefiled, unexcelled security from the yoke, unbinding. This is the noble search.
Wow.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What comes to mind immediately, I was listening to Yuval Navari the other day, and you could see the people that were at the panel with him like squirm when he said this, but he's just stating a reality, and I think it's the same reality that you see here, is that it was taken for granted back then that people just kept slaves. And that just like immediately jumped out
Mm-hmm.
at me here. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
because in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or slave. It's like they just assumed. They just automatically
Mm-hmm.
assumed that you would keep people
Right.
and that was okay. So what a trip, right? But
Yeah, they even did that in Europe and everywhere.
it's just it's
I just found
weird
out
to it
the
jumps
other
out
day.
at you. Yeah, right.
I didn't even know that. I watched a documentary and then found out that we had slaves in Europe. I had no idea, but we just did.
Yeah, it's a trip. It's a trip to think that, you look at like ancient teachings, like wisdom traditions, any wisdom tradition, and it's like, wow, they just, it's just somehow in the mind. Yeah. Anyway, fabrication,
Well, yeah, it was
fabrication.
just part of. I guess you just kind of had to do that to
Yeah.
survive this kind of harsh conditions of life where, life is very hard to get by. You get sick, you die, you got to have food to eat and shelter. You got to build things with your hands. We didn't have machines, we didn't have industrial engines. And
Yeah.
so you kind of had to have like these kind of people who would just help you survive. And, stripping
Yeah.
them of their freedom is kind of convenient to that.
Oh my gosh. And it reminds me of
Mhm.
like how, like if you look at why what was I was just watching recently about in where I live, because I've kind of lived all over the US because I was in the military, but when I lived in the
Nice.
South, when I lived in the
Nice.
South, or in like more rural areas, you have a lot more like farming families, like old farming families, like farming families that have been farming families since the United States became the United States. And they still sometimes you'll hear like, if you talk about, like I was doing a documentary with the family in California, and the way they talked about it, like if you could just see their body language, and this isn't a judgment at all, it was just a fascination for me. It was just like, wow, this is so interesting and it makes sense, even though it's so foreign to me. But they were talking about why it's so important to have really big families because, you need workers. And,
Mm.
my princess butt was like, my initial kind of like Shempa response was, that's terrible. And I'm like, wait, well, this is just practical, Sarah. I mean, you're such a princess. It's like, yeah, they're on the farm. There's nowhere to go. You got to work the farm.
Absolutely.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
It's just how it
Wow.
always has been. Have
Yeah.
a bunch of kids and then get them to work the farm.
And then they work the farm. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why, yeah, I, yeah. My job was the goats and my job was the chickens. Yeah.
Come on,
Um,
little Billy. You know, work the farm, man. You
come
know,
on, little Billy.
plant the
Oh my
corn.
God. That's hilarious. Oh
We
my
gotta
gosh,
eat
that's hilarious. That's
we gotta
right.
eat
We're
next
hungry.
winter.
We're hungry. Come on. Let's go.
Little Susie
Oh
and
my
Billy just,
goodness.
tilling the field with their bare hands, just,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It's yeah. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
we're
Well,
very privileged in this time.
yes, yes, we are
I mean,
hungry.
it
We're very
used to be
privileged in this time.
you're just born, you grow up, you work the field, you have a child, then you go to war and you die. That's like
Yeah.
the ideal
Yeah.
life of a man.
You're dead at like 40. You're dead at like 35 or 40.
You just
Yeah.
die of like a sword wound in a
Yeah, from the
war
plague, the
in,
bubonic
in those
plague,
times.
or yeah, tuberculosis, right?
Expire in early death.
Yeah, it's so true.
Now
Well, I,
we're just sitting at home complaining about everything.
that's
Oh,
right.
life is so bad.
That's right. That's right. You got to right
Yeah,
size that stuff. You got to put it in perspective. Well, I know I got to
for
go soon,
sure.
but if it's okay with you, I would love to just respond really fast on just the passage that you just read. Gosh, I really enjoy listening to you read too. You bring life to it.
Um, I'm really
Um,
glad. Yeah, I love reading
yeah,
stuff like out loud.
and
Yeah.
I think I'll just say that what I took from this is, um, yeah, what I think he's getting to here in the end of this is in Buddhism what's called the Bodhisattva, and I think what he's getting at is this idea that Bodhisattvas in Buddhism they maybe they've had some kind of a realization. Different people call it different things, but like they awaken, right? Maybe they have like an egoic death, maybe through the jhanas or whatever, to the degree that they really do have direct experience with the illusory nature, the impermanent nature of experience. They see through the fabrication. In Buddhism, it's called fabrication. But they decide to continue, like what you were saying. They decide to continue incarnating to help
Mhm.
others get to the seventh chariot. not have to keep
Mhm.
reincarnating in a suffering kind of life plagued with fabrication. I'm assuming that's what's meant by the last section, but oh my gosh, this is so dense. It's like I wish there was like a Buddhist teacher here who actually could understand, like the Pāli Canon. Like, well, I don't remember what language it was originally written in, but I feel like I don't
Yeah,
know how much of this I'm just like totally getting wrong.
yeah. Well, I'm a complete beginner, but somehow I feel like I'm just intuitively getting it all without giving it too much thought. It seems to be saying very simple things that are just phrased in a very obtuse and very, very, very complicated way, but it's very simple stuff. He's just talking about two different ways of searching for things, and that's just in the first sentence. There's two
Yeah.
searches, and one of them is searching for like impermanent stuff, which is things that are born and things that die, and then the other one is searching for things that don't get born and don't die. So I think that's all that this part is saying, right? Is that the
Yeah.
right
Oh, I don't
understanding?
know if they're. I don't. Let's see. Well, I think. Which part are you talking about? Like, are you thinking the whole, all of it?
Oh
I
no,
probably
sorry,
would
just the
back in the
part that I
context
read just
of.
now.
Oh, okay. I probably would put it back in the context of like what he says about um, because he does say there's a right and wrong path. So he's pretty clear on that. Like if you in
Hmm.
Buddhism, the Buddha was pretty clear. In other words, he was pretty argumentative about it. Like if you go back and you look at the earlier part of the book, he's talking about how this is the only path if you want to
Right.
be liberated from suffering. Period. And he also very clearly says that this is a path of action. Period. If you don't sit, if you don't do the work, you will never experience liberation. So I don't know that he would say anything obtuse that wasn't really. He was pretty hardcore. Um, I would say, let me go back and just, okay, I have to kind of read it in my head. And what may be said to be subject to birth, special, or subject to birth, la, 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 and what may be said to be subject by aging, illness, sorry, he just like all the repetition. I talked about that earlier about why does he do so much repetition? Does defilement is tied to the infection with them who has totally fallen
You
from
know what?
liberation.
I think it's because of like the nature of Chinese or whatever language it is of the character is
Ah,
just a different writing system, and so it's
okay.
easy for them to do a lot of repetition. I think, but here it's like
Yeah. I have to kind of,
maybe
I know I'm trying to get to like the little slug, the little nugget. So, and which is the noble, okay, this helps me to read it. And which is the noble search? There is the case where a person himself being subject to birth, seeing the drawbacks of birth. So here he's really getting at karma. And again, I think it would make sense if you go back and you look at like in the earlier part of the chapter, he talks about, what is fabrication? What are the five aggregates? That's like the underlying principle of Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths, life is suffering, and how do you alleviate suffering? By following the Eightfold Path, right? And then there are 8 different steps. They all work together, and Buddha says this is the only path. If you don't follow this path, you're never actually really going to ever find true alleviation from suffering. So I'm assuming that what he means is, like you said, yeah, there's 2 paths, but he's pretty clear that one path is the right way and one path is the wrong way. One path leads to suffering,
right.
one path doesn't. And it's not, and I don't like the
Absolutely.
words right and wrong. He's really clear about what the path of being attached to your death, being attached to birth, being attached to your spouse, being attached to stuff, being attached to power, being attached to this, being attached to that. That there's nowhere to go with that but suffering.
Hmm.
Because that's higher. And again, if you were to go back and kind of look at like sections that came before these suttas, so I guess that's why I'm thinking that what he means in the last section is the noble. And again, I'm guessing here. This is where I need a teacher, but I'm guessing he's saying that the noble search is someone who already recognizes all. And again, I'm not sure if he's talking about. Again, I don't know how much of this is the religiosity of Buddhism or the practical application of Buddhism, because you know, Buddha was quoted to have said, if you meet the Buddha, kill him. In other words, it's not found in text.
Mhm.
It's found in application. So I don't know if what he means here is, if he's talking about karma and the bodhisattva, like, hey, maybe this person actually becomes awakened, and the reason why they're still here on this shithole is because they want to help other people become awakened. I'm not really sure what he means by that. Yeah, so it's definitely kind of an extension of the earlier conversation, because the suttas are like a continuing conversation. You know, like they sat down together and started chatting it up.
Nice.
Yeah. So like, yeah,
Ancient
right.
tea party.
Totally right. Oh man, unfortunately, I gotta get off here, but oh my gosh, I've really enjoyed talking to you.
All right.
So yeah, you're
Yeah,
always
same
welcome.
here.
And yeah, I hope that wherever you are in the world, I hope you're doing really good. Yeah.
You as well, and I'm
Thank
glad
you.
to be part of the server and part of the community, and looking forward to more cool stuff.
Cool. Thank you. Be well. Right on. Take
Too.
care.
Have a nice